All right, so welcome everybody. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about conversations with God. This book is a very powerful book if you are on the beginning of your spiritual journey. All right, it is a story about a guy who has been lost, basically like all of us. And what he ended up doing is he wrote down all the questions that he's had, all the questions we've all thought in our mind. And one night he received answers. And so as he was writing these answers, he realized that he didn't know these answers. So they had to have come from somewhere else. And anybody who's ever had downloads knows that feeling where you ask a question and then you receive an answer. And if you had had that answer, you would have got it a long time ago. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the very, very basics of this book. And we're going to kind of go through a little bit of a book journey together. All right. So we're going to start with God never shuts up. All right. This is a foundational point to start with because of the fact that there are people who believe that they actually can't hear God or that there is not an internal conversation that is going on. And I want to go ahead and talk about that because all around you is a reality that has not been created yet. Okay, whether you want to call it quantum or whether you want to call it imagination or whether you want to call it a simulation, it's completely up to you. But we all have a general consensus of tomorrow has not happened yet, and therefore it has not been created yet. And so what this is actually talking about when it says that God does not shut up is that you are constantly receiving signals from God. You are constantly receiving signals from your higher self. Okay. And so when we look at society and we believe that some people receive signals and others don't, what we are actually doing is we are deciding what signals are good and what signals are bad. And as long as you're receiving a good signal, then you're receiving it from God. If you're receiving a signal that leads you astray, then you believe that you're not receiving it at all and that you were just listening to yourself. When in reality, it is all God. It is all your higher self that is guiding you. And even in those moments, and everyone's been there, in those moments where you're lost and you're scared or you're frustrated or you're angry or you're confused and you hear another voice, okay? If it is not telling you to hurt yourself or to hurt another, you are listening to God, okay? You are listening to your higher self. And the reason I keep interchanging these words is because God is interchangeable. You can call it higher self, you can call it source, you can call it Allah, you can call it whatever you want, but ultimately is the thing that is looking out for you. Okay. So when we look at this and it says that God does not shut up, what does that actually mean? Well, it means that there are multiple ways that you can actually hear God. You can hear God through just hearing, right? Some people hear voices or hear conversations, hence conversations with God. You can have feelings, which is the number one way that God actually communicates with you. Believe it or not, words are the least reliable way for us to communicate with God. And not only with God, but with each other, right? Words are the least reliable way for us to communicate with each other. When you love someone, you don't focus on the fact of making sure that you say it correctly. You focus on the fact of making sure you show it correctly. When you really love someone, you hold the door for them or you do things for them. You dress nicer. This is why it's called a puppy dog phase, right? When you love someone, you actually show up. And so you're trying to basically get that person to have the feeling of love, not focus on your words. Okay. So one of the best ways that God communicates with you is also your feelings. How do you feel about things, right? If you're in a situation and you feel uncomfortable, there's nothing wrong with that. It's God communicating with you. That's God saying, hold on one second. This is not where you should be. All right. If you're in a situation where you feel amazing, you feel uplifted, fantastic. That's a place you should be listening to those feelings. That's a place that you should realize that God is communicating directly to you by showing you something through your feelings. Feelings are a really good way for us to communicate with each other. And it only becomes a problem when we don't trust our feelings. And the reason we wouldn't trust our feelings is because our mind gets in the way. All right. So the next way that you can communicate with God is going to be through words, through writing them or through saying words. But the problem is words are just utterances. We made up the words that have the value. We made up the words by letters that we use in this world. And there's some fantastic poetry out there and people who talk about the power of your words. If you're not reading in the Bible, you can read it in other places. The power of your words is very important. And believe it or not, Nikola Tesla talked about this quite often when he was talking about if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. He is talking about frequency, which is your thought process, and vibration, which is your feeling. So your words and your feelings about them. Okay. So again, it goes back to the love. You can tell someone that you can love them, but you want to put feeling behind it. When you put feeling behind it, you add vibration to it. So frequency and vibration. All right. So what God is actually saying when he says that God does not shut up, in the very beginning of this, when it says that God does not shut up, what it is saying whether it is a frequency, in other words, a signal that's being sent to you, or whether it is a vibration, basically a feeling that's being sent to you, that is God. And again, by God, we mean your higher self. In every situation, the question is not whether or not God is talking to you. The question is whether or not you're listening. And those are two completely different things, because what you end up doing is you end up going through your life and you hear a voice, but you ignore it. And then you look back with hindsight and go, oh, I should have listened to that. I should have done that differently. But that's hindsight. That's after something has already happened. Okay. So God is constantly talking to you. The universe, whatever it is that you want to call it, is constantly talking to you. The real question is, are you listening? Are you paying attention to the signs? Are you noticing the little things? Those of you that are on a 9 vibes journey, you know that one of the biggest reasons we talk about 9 is because when you see 9 in your life, that is a signal, that is a sign. Pay attention. When you see those numbers, a lot of people like to call them angel numbers: 111, 222, 333, 444, 555, 666, 777, 888, and 999. These are signals, right? Because if you reduce them all down, they're all 3, 6, and 9, which is another thing that Tesla said. If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. But if you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, you would have a key to the universe. It's all the exact same thing. Okay. So whether or not it is through your thoughts or whether it is through your feelings, you are receiving messages. And it is not healthy for us to look out in the world and decide who isn't or isn't receiving messages. And especially when most of the tests to do this have been with people that they consider sociopaths, people that don't actually have feeling is what they believe. Okay. But that is not the case. It's just a question on whether or not they're listening. And listening is a lot harder than hearing. And I'll give you an example of a parent. Every parent is usually talking to their kid. They're trying to get them to understand something. Whether or not the kid listens or whether the kid hears it are two completely different things. Don't go out and do this. Being heard means, okay, don't do this, but it's okay if you do it. Don't go out and do this. Being listened to means there's a reason. There's a feeling behind that. And that feeling is care. That feeling is love. And so then it is up to you whether or not you want to listen to it. Okay. So the same exact thing goes for God. God is constantly talking to you. God is constantly giving you advice, constantly saying, wait a minute, don't go this way. You've done this before. But it is only a question on whether or not you are actually listening. Get your 9 vibes aligned.